XOXO, got the girl. Pose. Good morrow and merry meet. My name is Audra and you're in for a treat. Hi, Bo Bear. So I talked a little bit about credit in the way that I do. Hi, yes, I did in fact make a video about credit, but I hated it and I scrapped it, so you haven't seen it. I don't know if you will see it, but anyways. On with the video. Which is just like off the cuff, not scripted. And I'm going to talk a little bit about all of these installment plans, Afterpay, Klarna, and Affirm. Although Affirm is a little different than Afterpay and Klarna. So many of you may be asking, what is an installment plan if you don't already know? Well, once upon a time, there was layaway. And layaway was like this, but different in the fact that you had to leave your goods in the store. And this was most often done for big days like Christmas and a birthday, right? For those who just did not have the kind of money necessary to, go ahead and get their kids the things that they really wanted and be able to give them their special day or the huge Christmas that they wanted, layaway was a great flexible option for them, howsoever. If you missed a payment, your shit got back on the shelf. Like you had to hurry up and fix it, or they put it all back on the shelf and you lost your money. So that was pretty back in the day. But now we have Afterpay, Klarna, and Affirm, and several other services like this. So I first want to talk about Afterpay and Klarna. They do the same concept of layaway, except instead of you having your goods held, they are actually delivered to you.
Oh, darn, that's awesome!
As if you've already paid for all of them, like a credit card, but with no credit. That's the important differentiation between Afterpay and Klarna, and then Affirm. Services like Affirm are going to check your credit prior to allowing you to use their service, which is one of the reasons why I tend not to use it, because listen, let me be real, divorce completely destroys your credit and it's for years, literal years. So I use services like Afterpay and Klarna, and at first I, like many others, were adamantly against it. Like, if you can't afford something, then don't buy it. Brr. But I began to realize something very, very important about it, and that was, even if I have the money, sometimes I just don't feel like dropping $175 at Sephora in one go. Like, something about that bothers me, and it's not because it's makeup, I just don't want to. And I feel like there's a lot of people using the service just like that, and wherein buying clothes or anything like that, where they're just like, yeah, I just don't want to pay for this. Like, I have it, I just don't want to, right? And what a lot of us do is we go ahead and do that, and 9 times out of 10, a large chunk of us actually pay them off long before they're totally due. But the thing about these services that is fantastic is it does allow you to have the things that you wanted to buy, or in a lot of cases needed in your life. And who cares, want or need, it's never any of anybody's business how the fuck you spend your money. So there we go.
That's none of my business.
The fun part about this is, or not fun, but the interesting thing about this is that it does allow you to have the items in your home, much like you would get if you had a credit card. And there has been some criticism of these sites basically saying, it doesn't help your credit in any way, but I don't think that that's a problem, because if you're like me, I literally give 3 ginormous monkey fucks about my credit score, because honestly, I don't plan on staying in this country for very long, and I probably am not coming back when I leave. I personally find that the credit system is incredibly classist and racist, and tends to harm those of us who do not have any kind of generational wealth to help us along in this world. So services like Klarna and Afterpay come along and allow us to be able to indulge ourselves once in a while as well. So that Pat McGrath palette you were looking at, hey, there's Affirm for you. And you might be able to go in there, grab that, and pay it in installments and have the item in your home. Now, some people might be wondering how this works, because yeah, you're on a payment plan, but it's not affecting your credit unless you don't pay. How do they do this? Well, it's actually pretty beneficial for the stores who participate in it. Stores that go ahead and sign up for these services are paying a fee, but it's beneficial for them in that they are able to move stock that they otherwise wouldn't move. More and more people, especially my age and younger, are moving away from credit cards. cards. The temptation of getting wrapped up in large amounts of debt with high interest rates is frightening for many of us, especially once we got out of it. And I know that looking at services like Afterpay and Klarna could very well mean that other people could still end up in debt, but I do think that it has a bit of a different feel. For one, there's no interest. Zero, zip, zilch, nada, nyet. There's no interest. So when you are told your payments are going to be $27.40 for the next three or four payments, it's $27.40. There's nothing extra. You can actually go and divide the whole thing. There's no interest applied. So what that means is that you actually get to enjoy your items without interest attacking your way of life, which is something credit cards don't have. Yes, Audra, I know, but Audra, if you pay your credit card off in full, you don't even pay any interest. Yes, but that's if you are able to do so. So the thing about a credit card that makes it very, very different is if for whatever reason you spent $275 at Kohl's and you were expecting some money to come in at this point in time, but for whatever reason it's late, and now that means that you can't pay this off in full, you get hit with whatever that APR is. And let me just tell you, interest on most credit cards, and especially store credit cards, is astronomical and can make it even more difficult for a lot of people. Plus, the thing about credit cards is like having it in your wallet gives you like a little bit of stress, or at least that did me when I had them. There was always this feeling that like every time I had an emergency, I needed to use my credit card. And the problem with that emergency situation is most of the time it was an emergency. On occasion, it just was like, I blew my wad. I really wanted something, I bought it, I screwed myself over. I'm not afraid to admit that. But the thing about having credit cards as your backup emergency is that it's very difficult to actually pay that off. And so I feel like a lot of us who have any amount to put away somewhere, even if it's $300, I'd much rather have the $300 in cash than ever put it on a credit card, because that's gonna put me into more debt that I don't wanna be in. However, knowing that I can buy something for like that's $150, $175, $200 and pay it out over 4 installments, and if I want to, I can pay it ahead of time and still receive no penalties for doing so, kind of makes it a little bit easier for me, and it makes me feel more comfortable. And I'm really more careful about my spending than I ever was on a credit card, which I don't know the psychology behind that, but it's magic. There's something about knowing that, one, it isn't affecting my credit score, two, that I just have to pay it back and like I don't have any interest, so it's gonna be super easy. There's something about that whole concept that just like, I don't really understand it, and I'm trying to understand it, but like credit cards stress me out. Every time I've ever had a credit card, it's so easy for me to go overboard and just kind of lose my shit. And I think part of it, if I'm gonna be honest, is that I rarely had the access that I do with my Afterpay and Klarna. When I buy things using Afterpay and Klarna, it's easy for me to go in and see exactly what I owe before I even think about making another purchase. And looking at it and going, you know what? I don't need this right now. Let me just put this on the back burner until I'm ready. You know what I mean? Like I kind of figured out where I look at it in a way that I don't think I really truly had access, because I feel like credit cards were not really keeping up with your purchases as much as they could have been. I know, doesn't make sense. It was still in the modern era, but I don't feel like they were keeping up with it the way that you needed to. And on top of that, it was hard to calculate what the interest would be if you couldn't afford to pay back X amount of dollars. So I figured it out. The reason I'm more comfortable using services like Afterpay and Klarna versus a credit card is because of the fact that the amount of the payment comes directly out of my account. I don't have an option to delay my payment. I don't have an option to just skip it. It is coming out of my account. And because of that, I am far more careful than I was with a credit card, because with a credit card, I could just decide like, oh, I'm only going to pay $10, or oh, I'm going to pay this. Whereas with Afterpay and Affirm and all of those services, I don't have an option on how much the payment is. And I also don't have an option on when it comes out. It's coming out, baby. So I have to be careful. I don't have a choice. That being said, there's a lot of attitude that I've seen on Twitter about people sending little messages going, what would you do if somebody sent you a gift and you realized they paid it on Afterpay? Well, first of all, I'd not be a classist asshole and say something shitty to them like, how dare you buy me a birthday gift that I wanted and loved with
Afterpay.
But second, I wouldn't care. It's such a weird thing that we have gotten into, again, another class battle where we're essentially trying to make people feel small for being able to use their funds however the hell they want to. I don't even want to talk about the people who may not have necessarily had the full amount of money to buy you the thing. I want to talk about those who did and just didn't want to. Maybe they bought a few other things for themselves as well. Like, it doesn't mean that you should feel any type of way. And I feel like this behavior is just another way to try to gatekeep luxury and gatekeep people from having things. Again, this all harkens back to the reality that we expect poor people to look and act poor. We want people to be disheveled. We want them to have an old flip phone that has no internet capability, dirty shoes, gross socks, disheveled appearance. Like, this is what we expect. And if you do not have that, then somehow that stresses us out. And I know exactly where this comes from. It comes from the fact that if you look at somebody who looks like you, wearing the same shirt, the same shoes, same brand of everything, gets into the same kind of car, and yet they're poor, that means you're only seconds away from being them. And that's stressful. And so we create these weird divisions where we attack people for using their funds in a way that is best for them. Point blank, period, end of story. Regardless of the financial situation, someone is taking it upon themselves to use their money in a way that is best for them. And on top of that, find a way that doesn't impact their credit score negatively. Even pulling your credit report can bring your score down. So it's just like these kinds of things are, I think, a necessary evil and a kind of a cool way to combat capitalism. More and more people are like, or should I say less and less people, are interested in grabbing a credit card regardless of how great or how low the APR is. I feel like people are not interested in getting them because there's things about credit cards that are actually very scary. Number one is the increased credit line that you were handed. And you know what? I should have just talked about credit here because I'm doing a better job than I did in the other video. But anyway, here we go. The reality is they often increase your credit line without any say from you. Now, Afterpay does this as well, but for some reason, I think because interest isn't attached on the Afterpay, I literally never want to get to the maximum of it anyway. And I think that that might be the difference. With a credit card, it doesn't matter, and especially a basic regular like Visa, it doesn't matter where you're spending the money, right? You can go and buy things everywhere. And I think that that's one of the problems with credit cards, and for me especially, is it's very easy to lose track of what you spent and where and why and when, right? Because let's say you went to dinner and you can't remember if you used your credit card or your debit card, then you're kind of like running around checking all of your accounts to see what you've done. And with Afterpay, it's all in one spot. You just go and you look and you're like, oh, okay, so the total that I owe is $175 and this much of it is this, and they've given me this limit. But most of us, I feel like, don't ever want to actually get near or approach that limit. I think for me, anything more of coming out payment wise, anything more than like $75 a month is too much. The other side too is with credit cards, you have a minimum payment. And the problem with a credit card minimum payment is if it's like $15, right, you're never digging out of this. Whereas with Afterpay and Klarna services, it is straight up. This is how much you're going to have to pay. Make sure you have this money in your account on this day. And in fact, they even warn you when they're taking the money out. They're like, hey, your payment's coming up soon. Make sure the money's in your account. Because if the money's not in your account and it bounces, that will go on your credit report. But again, people look at it from like, well, how does the store benefit in any way, shape, or form? And I spoke on it a little bit earlier, but like they get rid of the stock in their store. 1. 2, it counts as a sale for them. It doesn't matter how that sale takes place. It's just like a credit card. Oh, and 3, it allows space in the store for new items, especially when you're talking about makeup. Ugh. That is so helpful for them. That's why there's so many beauty brands on these sites that you can use. Use your Klarna, use your Afterpay. Now, with Affirm, they do check your credit They don't seem to have interest, but they are going to check your credit and give you basically a credit limit. And this functions more like a credit card. I'm not as interested in that. But I do think that it's very interesting that we're entering into like a new world order, I would say, of credit and how credit will be used. I, again, feel like most credit is very predatory and harmful towards those who are brown and black peoples. And it is also very harmful to poor people. And I feel like what's happening is the playing field is getting more level. It's getting harder and harder for people to feel confident that they are better than someone. And also, I think it's going to start forcing the whole idea of credit to really change, because as less and less people participate in the quote unquote credit games, i.e. renting apartments, which even though a lot of apartments require, a credit check, a large amount of them, especially depending on how the market is going, will still lease you the apartment with double or triple deposit. And if you can come up with that, then you're good to move in there. But the reality is, I think more people are moving away from this idea that you must have debt in order to live, especially with stagnant wages in the US. Like, that shit is just a whole other next level. And as people realize that their wages really aren't going to increase, even as inflation does, the reality of buying a home, buying a new car, all of that kind of starts flying out the window. And you start realizing, like, what do I even need credit for? I'm never going to be able to buy a house, so it doesn't even matter. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on Affirm, Afterpay? How do you handle it? Do you have any of these services, and do you find them better or worse than credit cards? I want to know your experiences. Please let me know in the comments so that we can discuss. Also, when we're talking in those comments, let's make sure we're kind to each other, because let me tell you, if I see that you're rude, nasty, hateful, or shitty, I will immediately delete it and block you, because that's not the kind of community we have here. All right. Thank y'all so much for watching this video. If you'll do me a favor and hit the thumbs up button, so then that way the algorithm goddess can do her thing and keep pushing me further down the algorithm so that I can do whatever the fuck I want to. All right, as usual, huge shout out to my patrons and spooky bays, yeah. All right, without y'all, I truly wouldn't be able to do this the way that I am doing this today. Y'all definitely keep the bats in the belfry and the spiders firmly ensconced in their web, so I greatly appreciate you for that. And also to every single one of you who watch and like this video, you have no idea how much it means to me. I thank you for that as well. Until next time, you know it costs $0 to be kind. It's so good for your soul. And honestly, if you don't take care of it, I mean, doesn't it look like, my hair changes every other day. Don't you think I can take your soul? I can. Until next time, XOXO. Got the girl. Ooh. Look how greasy I am. You know what? We're gonna need to have a talk about this concealer, because it is luminous, but it is greasy as fuck.